Attention passengers, the Layover podcast is about to take off, where the hosts Tracy Davis and Patrick Trevino share the unfiltered, behind-the-scenes stories of entrepreneurship. The number one rule of the Layover podcast? Hold nothing back. So sit back, grab a drink, and enjoy your flight. This is the Layover podcast.
Can't accept the loss, I'm hard-headed. There's a little bit of madness to my method. Many falling off that fine line that I'm treading. I risk anything to be great, and I'm not letting nobody rob me of my victory. Number one, that's what I'm meant to be. When by any means, only thing that makes sense to me, I can make nice or make history. I got that dog in me, yeah. Turn me up, big energy.
So we are back in beautiful Nashville. Well, I guess we've never left.
No, we haven't left.
Pretty good. And we have India Mayer in studio today. Thank you for being
Thanks
here.
for having me.
You have accomplished a hell of a lot, and even just the past few years. And so we're so excited to hear your journey and how you've created Of Note. So tell us a little bit about India. Who are you?
Who am I? This is a long story now. I'm India. I grew up in Nashville. So I moved away for a while. I moved to Chicago, and then Nashville brought me back.
It does that, doesn't it?
It really does. I grew up here. I am the child of a musician, so grew up in a very creative family. I was actually homeschooled my whole schooling.
From the whole school?
Yeah, my entire time, which is a wild experience all through high school.
Yeah, I was homeschooled for high school.
Oh, you were?
Yeah.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah. For the last 3 years.
Was
of
that
high
because
school.
you were a troublemaker, or was it
Yeah.
by choice?
Do you guys want to know the truth? Or, the truth, honestly, was that I told my mom, I went up to my mom and said, Mom, I have to be homeschooled. This school is making me more dumb.
Yeah.
I just didn't feel like the school was actually giving me an education.
That's so funny. I have a friend who I knew growing up, and she knew that we were homeschooled, so she desperately wanted to be homeschooled. And her mom was a school teacher, and her mom's like, no, I'm not.
Yeah.
You can't, I'm teaching, whatever.
Right.
Also, she believed in, the
Naturally,
homeschool, of course. And so she was like, if you can write a paper and basically convince me as to why you should be homeschooled, then I'll consider it.
My
and
mom
so,
did the same thing.
Oh, she did?
She made me write a paper why.
Interesting.
And I wrote the whole paper, and then I said, unless you want to be like Adam Sandler. Adam Sandler went to my high school.
Oh.
So, and she goes, well, yeah, I kind of do.
Yeah, that seems like
not
a pretty good
Yeah,
situation.
but yeah, I had to write one too. That's interesting.
She timed her whole kind of convincing thing was that she timed she had a stopwatch of when she was actually learning, not when the teacher was teaching, but when she actually was learning something new, not when the teacher would go and help another kid or whatever, and not when she was like in lunch or walking through the halls or doing whatever. And I think it was something like an hour and a half or 2 hours of the day was actual learning time that wasn't just shuffling between.
Hours.
Yeah, exactly. And so I think that was the convincing factor. So she did, I think only for a year. But yeah, I was homeschooled throughout high school.
Yeah.
We went to what are called tutorials. It's essentially a school for other homeschool kids where you're I was with 100 other kids.
Okay, so you're still meeting
and we're taking
kids
classes.
and,
It's very much like college classes. You go to basically lecture style, and then they give you homework, and then
That's kind of what I went into. And then all of my huge testings were done on schools. Like I couldn't do it on my own.
Yeah.
I have to do that. But I think why I approached my parents about this was because everything that I was interested in school, they would only spend like 2 days on
Exactly.
it. And I was like, but
Yeah.
we didn't learn everything we needed to learn about that. And I'm a huge history buff, so I used to get very
So
upset.
was my brother.
We did this
Yeah.
No, they
Say,
bonded
you guys,
over
I
that
said
yesterday.
and
civics
actually,
history
too, the funny part is he went to BU,
Yeah.
and I went to BU
Oh, you
for
went to
first
BU.
year of grad for grad school, and I just, anyways, I don't know how I went on this rant
No.
but I was also homeschooled.
You resonate
So we
with
have something in
funny.
common.
Yeah. So I was homeschooled, which was a great experience. We traveled a lot. And so I feel like I got more of, I always knew how to talk to adults.
Yeah.
I was around people of all different ages, especially when you're homeschooled and the types of tutorials that we would go to. You were with kids of all ages. It wasn't
Correct.
like you were only with your grade.
Yeah.
So if you were in 8th grade, you were with seniors and would hang out with them and talk to them. So
it's interesting.
Yeah.
Because you typically hear that concept of people who are homeschooled, they're not as socialized as, you would be.
Yeah.
But that's the opposite, it sounds like.
Yeah. I mean, I think there's definitely that group. And I think that homeschooling is definitely not good for everybody.
Yeah.
And it should be on a case-by-case basis, just
Absolutely.
like, public school, private school. Any schooling is not, but I do think the idea of not alternative school, but other ideas of what schooling can be is an interesting thing and probably could benefit a lot of people that don't get attention in the 100%. Ways that they need to.
Can I ask you a question about home? This is the last thing I say
Sure,
about homeschooling.
We can talk for an hour about that.
Do you find that being homeschooled taught you to have self-motivation and drive?
Me, yes.
So it did for me too.
Yeah, not everyone. It's funny because when I went to college, I think I found the transition a lot easier than a lot of my other students, because I was so used to taking in a lesson and then having a week to decide when I was going to do my homework and independently. Yeah, exactly. And so for me, I think it was a lot of independence. By the time we were in high school, it wasn't like my parents were overseeing. I mean, it was just, you have your lessons, you do your homework. They would say, is all of your schoolwork done? What were your, they were pretty loose. We didn't have, at that point, it was like, if you could get your schoolwork in two hours, then you can get it in 2 hours, and then you had the day.
It's living life versus
I think it did. I think it did a lot. I think for me, it was a little harder. My brother is super book smart, and so I always struggled a little bit with wondering whether or not I was smart in that way. And I wondered, if I had gone to a quote unquote regular school, which is what we called it, if I would have more fact knowledge. Like I'm not into history. I don't have a lot. I can't just spout off.
Yeah, she's always yelling at me because she calls it like, what do you call it?
Fun facts with Pat is what we do, because he randomly just spews these trivia and not similar to Brendan.
It's funny. It's similar to Brendan. It's very similar to my mom, is very similar. And my husband is also like that, of course. Yep. And so, but I think at the end of the day, it was great because I was just smart in other ways.
Absolutely.
And so then my parents just sort of leaned into that. I mean, my mom, and at the time I was like, why didn't you make me take XYZ thing? And now she's like, well, you could just Google that. She was her whole thing was figuring out how to find the answer, like learning how to learn versus just knowing the thing off the bat.
And that sticks with you. That's a lesson that everybody should learn in life.
Yeah, for sure.
Like,
go
find
can
out
you
the
go
answer.
figure it out?
Yeah.
And it's interesting now in what I do, and just even talking, I spoke at a kids' college class, and now they have influencer marketing classes at colleges.
Way.
Isn't that
which is
wild?
Crazy, yeah.
What?
Yeah.
So my daughter's a
it's
freshman
wild.
at Suffolk in Boston.
Oh my gosh, yeah.
And I was looking at some of the classes, and I was like, this is a class.
Yeah.
Social media marketing.
It's wild.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, and so it was just interesting to, when I was in college, this wasn't even a job or a career. So it's so weird to speak to somebody and they're like, what sort of advice? And
where did you go to school?
DePaul University in
cool.
Chicago.
Cool.
Yeah.
Chicago is one of my favorite cities.
I love Chicago.
It actually may be one of my top 3 favorite metro cities. It has a very bad rep for no reason. Well, many reasons, but should I say, and it's windy. And cold. But actually, like, downtown Chicago is like really, really nice. And the food is amazing in Chicago.
And what did you study in DePaul?
Public relations and communications. Okay. Yeah. So I went through 1 semester of psychology, which is what I wanted to do, and then realized it was a lot of science and that might not. And I took a gap year after high school. So I took a year off and I randomly interned for a PR company that my parents' neighbor owned.
Okay.
And so I interned there for a year. It was a paid internship. I just wanted to do something.
Sure, absolutely.
And make some money in between. And so that was my only PR experience. And then I thought, this seems practical. And I guess I did it for a year. So that's
what made you take a gap year?
My brother took a gap year.
Okay.
I think because I didn't know where I wanted to go to school.
Mm-hmm.
I had looked at small liberal arts schools, which is what I thought I really wanted.
Sure.
And then I had determined that wasn't, that I wanted to be in a city. And so then it was very overwhelming, the process of, I'm a really bad test taker.
Mm-hmm.
I have terrible test anxiety. And so the SAT, ACT, that was like
It's
my
overwhelming
nightmare
for
of
people.
life.
Yeah.
And so my parents were like, just take a year off and see where you want to go.
I love how they just, were so supportive of these decisions.
Yeah,
That it's not structured in like
Right,
such
right.
a
Like, get to
stringent
college, you
way.
gotta go.
they said as long as you go at some point.
Mm-hmm.
And so, I took a gap year. I loved it.
Mm-hmm.
I was so ready to go to college.
I was going to say, was it hard to go back to schooling after that gap year?
No,
or you were
it
itching?
was.
Okay.
I was working so much, and I thought, thank goodness I can go somewhere for 4 years and not have to be in this. I was working in an office, like a front desk person, and getting there early and being yelled at, and
you learned what you didn't want to do.
Yeah, it was
right?
definitely a good experience. I would say that was like my hardest boss experience.
Oh, wow.
During that time.
What happened?
Well, it's the only man I've ever worked for.
Dun, dun, dun.
Which
Explain,
could be,
say no more.
Yeah. So that
And
might have
next
been,
topic.
that might have been part of it. And it was just like in a more old school. I'm actually very grateful because it was, it was hard.
An experience.
But they, yeah.
She's like, I don't know what I should say.
Yeah,
about
exactly.
it.
No. It was
teasing.
like nothing really bad, but you just
It's like one of those core memories. You're like,
things
I know.
are tossed at you and
not in a gentler way.
yeah, exactly.
Well,
There
I
was
think
no
women
gentle
leadership is very
workplace.
different than men leadership. I mean, not in a good or bad way, just they're very different.
They're very different.
Yeah.
I'm not gonna.
You're not going to contribute.
No, you know what?
He's
nor
like, I
should
know.
you.
when
And
I-
nor should you.
There's a time and place.
Yeah,
and this is the
and this
one
isn't
where I'm
it.
like,
Yeah.
yes. So, anyways, so you graduate college.
Right, exactly. Yeah, so that's why I took a gap year. And and then I think it was the schooling part wasn't hard.
Yeah.
I mean, college was a transition as
Right,
it always
right,
is,
right.
but it was funny because I felt like I was so sheltered. I was so non-sheltered in so many ways because of the way I grew up, and then yet sheltered in so many
Right,
ways.
That's
So it's
interesting,
like a funny
because if
thing.
you're the daughter of a musician, you're used to a lot of different environments, tours, traveling.
Yeah.
But at the same time, you didn't have those standard put quotes on standard
it was
experiences.
an interesting thing. But no, I loved it. I love Chicago. My 4 best friends still live there, so I go there a lot.
You do go, yeah.
I actually desperately wanted to go to BU because Brendan went there and I didn't get in, and it was very depressing.
I actually don't know how I got in. I'm just gonna full disclosure. I thought it was a mistake.
That was like a real, and in retrospect, I think I shouldn't have even applied because once your sibling has gone somewhere and then if you can't get in, it's a bit demoralizing.
When I went for grad school, I remember like I applied to 3 different grad programs, and I didn't even open up the BU one because I was like, well, I don't want to get rejected on a Friday.
Well,
like,
right,
you know what I mean?
exactly.
So I waited till like
school.
Tuesday or so, and I opened it, and I went into the School of Business there. It was fast-paced learning.
Yeah.
Only reason why I didn't finish school there is because at the time I was living in New Hampshire, so I was commuting.
Yeah.
And it's an hour and a half
that's a lot
at
of
times.
commuting. Yeah.
And it was just at the infancy stages where they started running, I don't want to date myself, but they started running like hybrid programs where you go to campus 3 days and then 2 days online and then just keep going. And it was great. Until I was in traffic and I had a Friday class that ended at 3:30. I'm like, well, I'm not going to get home till 6 now.
That's brutal.
And I was like, I just couldn't do it anymore.
So you went through college.
I went through college, yep.
And you studied PR, public relations.
Yeah.
And then what was that next step for you?
So I got I did internships.
Okay.
DePaul that's school I went to. DePaul had this great program where they were very, I forget what, it was a really cheesy line, but it was something like, the city is your classroom or something like that.
Right.
So romantic and beautiful.
Exactly. And they had all of these classes where you would go. There was one in particular that was an internship-based class, and all of the classes were at PR firms in Chicago. So they would host you, and you could meet them, and so it was like the best networking experience. And I was a major suck up to my teachers. I I got many grades changed. I was a major teacher's pet. And I don't know if you can use that term anymore.
Who cares?
Back in the day, you could, but
I know. I'm like, now
You're like,
cut it
what can I say that will get canceled?
And so I had this class with a professor named Ron Culp, who I loved. And I met all of these PR firms and I got a bunch of internship offers. And then I ended up working for a really tiny PR company by a woman who had started it. I think she was like 27 at the time. Wow. I was her first ever employee. And she did PR, but also social media marketing.
Okay.
This was when Facebook ads had just,
right.
they were at their
started,
boom. So I ran a ton of Facebook ads and ran social media accounts for restaurants and local Chicago businesses. And I had a few offers at big firms and decided to go for a tiny.
What was the reason behind that decision?
That's a good question. I don't know, really. I think I just didn't want it to feel super corporate.
Yeah.
Right.
You already had that corporate feel experience that you did not like.
Yeah, I think I've just always gravitated towards smaller. I felt like there was a lot more growth. I felt like I could move up a lot faster.
Yeah.
Because,
and you wear many hats, so you experience so many different parts of the business.
So yeah, I don't know. It's interesting. I often wonder had I chosen something else, but
Seems like you made the right decision.
I think, I think it all worked out.
Yeah.
And then I was there for, I think, a little over a year.
Okay.
And then, it's so funny when you graduate college and you start your job and you get so antsy right away. There was an article, I think it was in the New York Times or on a podcast like years ago. And they talked about people struggling coming out of school because your entire life you graduate to the next grade and you do the next thing. And
psychologically, you're expecting.
Like every however many months you're moving up, you're getting a grade that says like you're done with this, and then you go to the next grade, and then you're working toward it. And in high school, you're working toward college, and then you get in college and whatever. And so people said, when you get into a job and you're not promoted in the first 6 months, you're like, well, where do I?
Interesting.
Yeah, which was fascinating.
But it makes sense
from a psychological standpoint. Like you want to go to the next thing. So I think I was at that antsy.
Sure.
And I had an offer from the PR company that I had worked at during my gap year. I met a woman there. No, different. She had left and went to another company, and she said, "Hey, we got a new big account. Like, do you want to move back to Nashville and help us run the account?" And I was like, okay, might as well.
What is like the everyday life in PR? So for people who don't really know, like what are your daily tasks?
Really traditional PR. It's a lot of pitching to media to get stories placed. So that's primarily what I did. Writing press releases. That's like very old school. Yeah. But
and
writing
that's what
press
we've
releases.
used for PR.
Yeah. And that's what I learned. I mean, that's what you learn in school.
Right.
You learn how to write a pitch. You do all of this stuff. So that was the majority.
Okay.
And then, as PR evolved, it was like social media for accounts. So I would do that a lot.
Yeah.
We did some events. So it was just like more catch-all marketing, but a lot of it was really traditional, like writing press releases, placing stories.
The evolution of it is interesting because you have to evolve or you die in that industry.
For sure. And I think, that is what that's what made my decision easy to get out of PR because it was just not, there's only, especially when you work for a local, if you're working in Nashville and you're mostly working on brands that want local press. There's only so many local outlets.
Sure. Right,
so they're wondering why they're not getting a front page story in the Tennessean, which is our newspaper every week. And you're like, well, why would they talk about, also, do you have any story? What's So I moved back to work for that company. Because I was the only employee at this other company, and then she hired other people, but I moved up quickly. So I actually took a step back to come back. I was an account executive, and I came back as like a junior account executive. And
it was worth it.
It was worth it. Yeah. I bought a house in Nashville. I moved in with my parents for a year and Airbnb'd that house and squirreled away money.
Started the entrepreneurial, journey there.
I told my best friends in Chicago when I was moving, and they said, "Why are you moving back to Nashville?" And I said I wanted to become a real estate mogul by the time I was 30. So I couldn't do it. I couldn't buy property in Chicago very easily.
Yeah, I mean Chicago real
It's
estate.
like, it's like Boston.
Yeah,
It's
exactly.
I feel like Nashville real estate now is insane.
So
I was looking at apartments in Boston, and I was looking for a 2-bedroom, and it was a really nice area. I was looking at in the Seaport area, and it was like $7,000 for a 2-bedroom.
Yeah,
and I was like,
that's crazy.
I'm just back in New Hampshire.
2 or 3
I'll be like
mortgages.
a lakefront property.
I know it is funny. Yeah, it's wild.
So what made you want to buy the house to Airbnb versus live in it out of curiosity? Just a business kind of.
Yeah, I think when I moved back here, I immediately started to look for houses, and then I remember I was with my parents. I submitted an offer, and then I got an email that the offer was accepted.
Oh, wow.
And I had a full panic attack. I was like, well, what does this mean? And my mom was like, it means that you bought a house. And I'm like, well, can I get out? And she was like, I mean, not real. Like, it was, I really had
I had the
major
same experience.
It was so funny.
Because no one walks you through that process.
No.
And then a real estate agent, they go so fast.
They go so fast. And I just had and so I think I was sort of stunned and thought, why did I do this so quickly? And am I ready to move? And so I thought, well, I can live for free at my parents' house. I just spent all of this money on a down payment.
Totally.
So I think in the first year, I almost made my full down payment back from Airbnb-ing it. So it was worth it. Yeah. But it was so much work. I did it. My mom helped me, cleaned it after everyone. I mean, it was really hard.
That is a lot of work.
But I was working full time. I had no living expenses and I was Airbnb-ing it. So it was, I'm glad that I did it.
You're just pocketing all that money.
It was funny. Like my friends would come to visit and they'd be like, wait, are we not going to stay at your house? I'm like, well, it's
it's rented out right now.
You're like, you can rent it.
You can rent it. Yeah, exactly. My friends did. They came to surprise me once and tried to, and it was already booked.
That's hilarious.
That's cool. That's cool.
Do you still have it?
Yeah, I still have it. It's now long-term rental.
Okay.
So I have renters in it, and
That's
it's right
awesome.
by the soccer stadium. Pretty much.
Yeah, it's a
So
beautiful
now
area.
that part of town's exploded.
I was going to say,
great for me.
smart real estate decision.
Yeah.
So after you became the real estate
After my mogul, well, I mean, like one property. That's all I did. That's all. I bought that one house, and that was it.
So from there, where did you take where you are now? Like, when did you make those decisions to start making the steps into where you are now in business?
Yeah, that's a good question. I think I just sort of always knew that I would work for myself.
Yeah.
I think that, my family is a small, they work for themselves. My mom runs my dad's business. I just never really thought anything else.
Yeah.
I either thought I would be like in a C-suite of a super corporate. Like I thought I would really climb the ladder at like a huge corporate or I would do something on my own. So I left the job that I moved back here for, went to another job. I met my now business partner and we just started to talk about, if we did something else, what's PR really doing anymore? Where will it go from here? She worked in New York prior to living in Nashville, and she worked at Lucky magazine.
Oh, wow.
And which was the first magazine to put influencers on their cover. They were kind of the first one. I forget what the first one was, but it was the first publication to really see influencers as. And in New York, it was like there were socialites. So the reason why we named our company Of Note is because
I've always wanted to ask you that.
People of note. So the idea is it doesn't matter if it's who it is, it's a person of note, and that's why they are seen in that way. So it's like the new form of a social. Think about all through history, there's been these women of note. And so that's why we named our company that. But we kind of started talking about, okay, well, what would we want to do? We were sort of bored.
Yeah.
We were working with influencers because again, when PR, you start to have to do other things. You have to evolve. So I was meeting creators and they were saying, there's nobody in Nashville who's really focusing on the influencer economy. And it's booming. There's a bunch of influencers who live here. There's also, there's like country music influencers, straight up influencers.
Yeah, that's what I was going to ask.
There's a lot of crossover.
I was going to ask, like, in Nashville, I mean, I know it's known for its music.
Yeah.
But and without giving any names or anything, but like, where do you see a lot of the influences coming from? Like, what are the influencers focusing on that you see here in Nashville?
Well, mostly it's this sort of general lifestyle influencer.
Yeah.
It's so crazy because when which was here before, and the influencing has really evolved. So it started as majority were fashion influencers.
Yeah. Right.
This was when Instagram was photos. It was all about
Right.
creativity.
Right.
Fashion blogger was such a, blogs were such a thing, which is now having a resurgence with Substacks, which have become super popular, which I love. And so it was a lot of fashion, street style, that type of thing. Now it's really evolved into, obviously there are subsets of influencers. And so, but now it's really evolved into almost like a mini celebrity, like a I don't want to say reality show because that's not really it, but really documenting daily life. And so you're seeing this behind the scenes. And so Instagram stories have become such a thing, and people are just following along with these people's lives. But you feel like you have an insight, you get to know them. There are influencers there's a girl who I started following when I lived in Chicago. And I have watched her get engaged, get married, have 3 kids, move from Chicago to Charleston. I've seen, I've been following her for 10 years. Yeah. So it's like, it's
almost like you're a part of their life.
Yeah, which is weird, but that's the thing.
Yeah, I don't know. I wouldn't say it's weird. I think it's just a new way of how people connect with people, right? In a sense. But from my experience, I struggle with that because I'm like, I don't want to watch you take a shower. Like, you get what I'm saying? In a sense, like, or I can tell you from a fashion standpoint, I follow a lot of fashion influencers. Yeah. I'm big into like sneakers. Yeah. And so like there's a couple of people that I follow. And I can't tell you, I think I told you this, when I had my townhouse, I furnished my entire townhouse on Instagram.
Yeah.
Like literally, like I was like,
and you helped them furnish their entire house by all the affiliate.
Yeah, exactly. I was like, you know what? I like that guy's computer setup. I'm buying that.
Yeah,
I like that person's fake tree. I'm buying that aspect of it. But it's even. I mean, it definitely has a direct impact on how consumers think, right?
Oh, definitely.
So we're watching. We're going through. And do you see a lot of that taken off of why someone becomes an influencer? Actually, that's a great question. I've always wanted to ask someone that. What drives someone to become an influencer?
Well, I think.
From your experience of what, from
my, and I can only speak from my experience, but the sort of OG bloggers, it was a creative outlet. Most of them started it as a side hustle. There was really no money to be had. Companies would say like, oh, we'll gift you this and you can talk about it on your blog. And then Instagram started. So then they started sharing that content. Now people are going into trying to become an influencer, which really wasn't the thing before. The OG bloggers and then turned into influencers, creatives on Instagram, whatever platforms. They sort of did it accidentally.
Okay.
Not to say that they didn't put a ton of work into it, but like, there was a time when it was a lot easier to get followers on Instagram. Yeah. So all of a sudden they'd say, oh, well, I have 50,000 followers. Okay, well, I can kind of start monetizing this. And then brands would start reaching out. And then brands started to realize that you could do advertising with such a strong ROI. So if I pay an influencer $10,000 to promote sneakers, I can track every single sale. And sometimes if they're a great influencer, they're making all of that money back and then some. So all of a sudden your marketing dollars, it's directly turning into sales versus paying $10,000 for 3 days on a billboard where you really don't know. I mean, there's awareness, which is great, or a magazine that's circulating to mostly doctors' offices and you have no idea. There's so now most brands are dumping the majority of their marketing budget into influencing. So maybe not the majority, but a lot of
I mean, it makes perfect sense.
Yeah, because it's because you can see the results, and people are buying from them, and then the creator is getting paid not only for the ad that they're doing, but also for affiliate sales commissions on what they're selling. So I think a lot of people kind of fell into it and then said, oh, I can, and then really hustled to make it what it is today for their own personal platform. Now we have clients and there are a lot of influencers that are really treating it like a job from the start. They're trying to gain followers. They're picking their sort of niche. yeah, they're becoming it. I mean, it's so it can be very lucrative.
That's what I was going to say is like, is it lucrative enough that it's not like you get a job and you start getting a check, right? Like after a couple of a week or two.
It takes time.
It does take time to build out. Sense. So from what have you seen when these influencers, or by the time do they come to you, they already have a following, or do you help them? Have people come to you and say, hey, I'm trying to become an influencer? Yeah. And then you kind of help. How does that work?
We get people a lot who ask us to help them to become an influencer, to which we say, no, thank you. If we knew that, then if I knew it, then I would be an influencer because I could make a lot more money doing it.
Hold on, let me just scratch off my
exactly.
not having this.
Exactly. So no, we don't do that. Now that our company has grown, we have thresholds. They have to be making a certain amount of money. They have to have certain back-end analytics. Yep. Things have changed a lot. It used to be that brands would say, oh, we'll pay you $10,000. Let's just see what happens. And now there are super high expectations in terms of the return.
Gotcha.
Which is very frustrating for the creator and for us, frankly, because never in the history of business ever were marketing dollars free. And so now to get an email that says, okay, well, we'll pay her this, but I say her because currently all of our clients are women, but obviously they are male influencers. We'll pay them this, but they have to make a 5-time return on that.
Oh, wow.
In order for us to rebook them.
Interesting.
And to me, that's just a crazy, but they can get it. They are, they're doing it.
Right,
so some people are able to get a 5 times return, which is wild. But that's becoming more and more lightning in a bottle. That's becoming, harder to get.
Well, can you explain what Of Note is?
Sure.
So that would be helpful to kind of map out the landscape of what you guys focus on.
Yeah. So, I mean, broadly, we're an influencer marketing agency. Okay. Primarily, we are a management company, so we manage influencers. Basically, we are the broker between the brands and them to create a brand deal for the ads that they do on their platforms.
So how do you get to know the brands? How do you become, that middleman?
Yeah, so when we started, we didn't know any of the brands. I mean, we had PR experience, but we didn't know anything about. I mean, we knew about it, but it's a very different, different. And at the time, a lot of it was just the PR person that you would talk to at brands. Now we're either working with an agency. So now there's 2 middle people. There's an agency and us, and then the brand and the creator. So now brands are hiring out agencies to run these programs for them. And most of the time then the brand is saying, we're going to give you $1 million and you go and run it. And they'll approve the lists and stuff of who they're working with, but they'll do all of the in-between. But now it's all just building relationships, I mean, similar to PR, similar to any job, you have to go out and get leads and figure out who's with who. And now brands oftentimes have multiple people. They'll work brand direct. They'll also work through an agency. They'll work through an affiliate program that also runs campaigns. So you kind of have to do a lot of digging and then also just.
So when you and your partner were kind of visioning this up, how does that work? Were you guys just throwing ideas at a whiteboard, or were you having a glass of wine and saying, we're bored, let's do this? Where did this really come from, other than you both didn't want to do PR anymore, right?
Yes, we both didn't want to do PR, and we both wanted to start our own thing, but we didn't want to do it alone. We wanted to have a partner. And so we had become really close really fast and decided we were like a good kind of match.
Yeah.
We thought something in the influencer space because it was it was booming, and it's only boomed
more and more,
especially throughout COVID. I mean, I think just like the idea of shopping through an influencer. So we kind of were just throwing ideas at the wall. She really wanted to have, Katie Shaw is her name. She's amazing. Shout out. And she really wanted to have a physical space, which I thought was a brilliant idea. She was like, I'm sick of just sitting behind a computer. Yep. We thought about opening a boutique. I mean, we were like, we'll do anything. Like, what could we do, But we were both really into influencers. We followed them. We, worked with them. I was really interested, both of us, but I was really interested in the management perspective of it because there was no management company in Nashville yet. And so one day I remember we were driving and she said, I had this idea. She said, I listened to a podcast with the founder of the Museum of Ice Cream, which is essentially an experiential, quote unquote, museum. I don't know if you've seen it.
I've seen similar ones.
Yeah. And she was crushing it with sponsorships, like ice cream sponsorships and all of these companies who wanted to work with her because it was this idea of putting your phone away and going through this experience. Of course, then it became like a viral sensation, which wasn't really the point. But the point was to be in a place and get this sort of experience and rather than just being behind your camera on your phone. And so she said, you know, what if we did that for influencers? What if we provided them a space that they could create and then we partnered with brands that would sponsor the space? So if, you know, a really big beverage company would want to sponsor the fridge in the house and then in turn they would have the creators posting about them because they would be. And this was really before TikTok houses, which were such a thing for a moment, came out. That was a different thing because people were, you know, there was like 18-year-olds all living in a house together and creating content. Like,
so reality TV.
That was such a blip of a moment. And she had this brilliant idea. And I said, that sounds great. And then we should do that. And then down the line, we could do management or do influencer marketing for brands. But we'll start with this and we'll get all of these brand relationships. And then we can propel that into working with influencers directly.
I have a question about influencers.
Sure.
He's so stuck on this.
So what's with the dancing? Right? When you get, I just have to say, you'll get someone who'll do like a female or male or groups of males, and they just do a 15-second dance.
Yeah. That's really how TikTok started. That's really how TikTok started.
But that's to gain followers, or what's the outcome of that?
It's just the thing. It's just a trend. Yeah.
You're 38. Dear. So you're not, I feel like he's like 55.
No,
he's like, I don't know what this TikTok is.
Yeah, I don't know really what TikTok did start as sort of like a dancing platform, and still now it's so interesting because this really relates to the music industry. Now you can tell that artists like Meghan Trainor is big. Her music has blown up on TikTok. You can tell that her management company or whoever, her label, are hiring the most like famous TikTok dancers to come up with the dance to her song, and then that's going viral, which is then making the song go viral. So that's part of it. I mean, it's all about a trend.
Yeah, it was just so wild because my kids are at that age now where they're like on TikTok, and I think my son has learned so much about his artists because he follows his famous artists and et cetera, et cetera. But man, some of these dances.
You're not going to have to dance, don't
No, it's just like.
I don't dance.
Yeah, and some of the old songs from like the 90s are coming back, right? Almost like they get a rebirth of music. And then the last thing I have on social media, and I'll stop on this rant, is the debunking of information. I always make fun of this all the time, but you'll get those people that come on and say, you're not living your life the right way. You got to get up at 4 a.m. and do sit-ups and then meditate and then do this. I'm like, dude, that's like 4 hours of my morning. You know what? My morning, I have other things to do on there. But do you see a lot of that taken off too? Or is there like, because it's such an open platform, it's like really it's whatever your niche is, that's where your lane is and that's where you stay? Because, like, you don't see someone who, like, well, let's say, I'm just going to say something like they're sponsored by a major corporation for, like, travel, right? Let's just say that, right?
Yeah.
So they do travel vlogs and experiences and But then you have the individual who, like, looks like a used car salesman and he's trying to give financials of how to make 6 figures on Instagram. Like, how much of that is, do you have to sift through to see if it's real or not? Or do people even sift through that? I know it's a loaded question, but I asked you just because you have so much experience dealing with influencers.
Yeah. I mean, there is sifting through that. I think, like everything, there are upsides and downsides.
Right.
The upside is that there's this sort of wealth of knowledge and information and connection that you can get from social media platforms and I think there are a lot of downsides. I think, to me, the debunking and all of that, I mean, people, I think for younger people, what will be harder is that you'll have to do so much more training on how to think logically and think like, okay, just because I see something doesn't make it truth, and what is an opinion versus what is verified.
Plus AI adding to the mix. It's,
totally. But then I also, there's a subset of TikTok influencers that are women trying to teach other women how to save money and how to use the stock market. And again, they're very much saying like, this is just my opinion, go get your own financial information. But I also think it's brilliant, to have people think like, oh, I can have this, net worth at this age if I just start doing XYZ thing. So I think there's a lot of pluses to having the information out there. I do think it'll be so much harder for younger people to know. Have you seen the videos there are videos of like me in 8th grade, and they're like, it's like me in 8th grade, and it's like girls dressing up and being silly in front of, what was on a MacBook, what was the like camera app, you know what I mean? Yeah. Which is all I did when I was, in 12 or 13 or however.
100%.
And now it's like me at 13, and then it's like kids now at 13.
Yes.
And they're like doing
these crazy TikTok
dances, and you're like, what is happening? And how do you look like that? Because I think the adulting of younger people through those platforms is a little scary.
Yeah.
I'm more concerned about the idea of consumption and what that means for people. And so if I see, and just the truth behind it. So if I'm watching an influencer, and this is very much my own personal soapbox, and in no way related to the of Note opinion. If I am a 14-year-old girl and I'm watching one of my favorite influencers, particularly one that's 19, starting really young, and they are showing off this really fancy life that they've created. They're going on these luxury vacations. They are buying designer bags. They're doing all of this stuff. How am I not thinking, well, what am I doing wrong? Why don't I have that? When in reality, 75% of what that influencer is wearing is gifted to them. The luxury vacation might have also been gifted in exchange for posts. We just don't know. We don't know. And so there is a surge of transparency. A lot of creators will say what is like, I recommend this, and this is, well, you have to, for FTC, you have to do an ad, but a lot of creators are now really sharing what's gifted versus not, which is, I think, helpful to see. 100%. Because also, if your entire wardrobe is gifted, of course you have extra money to buy a designer bag. You're not buying any of the other stuff. So that's the thing that, to me, is a little concerning.
It is a little scary.
And I think it will have to correct itself.
It's funny, real quick, but when we were growing up in, I guess junior high, whenever, social media started to, social media came out, I think I was in college, but when, the internet, people were chatting, social and cyberbullying was like the start of the conversation. I remember having school discussions where they'd pull us in and they're like, the cyberbullying where people are on AOL chat, all of the things. Now I feel like parents really have to have those discussions about, how to manage social media with their kids, and so that they don't get into this mindset of.
Yeah, didn't Florida just pass a law that no one under 14 can have a social media account? I just saw that. I just saw that was just put into
it real news or was
it? It was real. It wasn't somebody on TikTok dancing.
I know, I'm like, real news or
no, they were dancing. They were dancing.
Yeah, they were dancing and sharing the law. Right.
The other thing I wanted to say was that, because you bring up a very valid points on the amount of consumption, right? And the amount of that comes in. And I always look at it from a sense that an influencer can also make you feel like shit, because you feel like I'm not doing enough to get to that point, right?
Yeah.
But some of my favorite accounts I follow are like these accounts that debunk other people's posts, right? Where they're like, you're not flying, that's a studio rental, that it looks like you're flying first on a private jet.
Yeah.
Or that's not your Lamborghini, we actually pulled your rental agreement and you rented that car. And I follow these things because what I start to understand is, start to like depict of what's real and what's not, right? And what's reality, because you see this stuff in business all the time. Like, I follow a lot of business coaches and stuff, and they have this like, you need to pull in a Lamborghini, and that's how. And I was like, well, that's how you measure success, right? That's your interpretation. You want to drive a Lamborghini and look flashy and great. I rather ride a bike, right? And still, I measure success differently, right?
Yeah.
The last thing I have, which is a funny rant, and I'm going to tell you this is kind of funny. When's the last time you went to the gym?
Like a few days ago.
Okay. Doesn't it look like this studio? There's phones and cameras recording everyone's workout.
Mm-hmm.
No, not in my gym, but I do know that that's a thing.
Holy cow.
I go to a gym where you can't do that. Yeah, you can't.
I need to know that gym membership because I went to a gym when I was traveling, and I just got like a day pass across from the hotel. And I might have said excuse me 7 times because I was tripping over people's phones, cameras. I'm like, is that like I looked at one thing and I was like, is that like a new type of workout machine? It's a freaking tripod for a camera.
I know, it's a camera.
And then there's people not working out and just filming other people working out. And I was like, weird. Are you guys going to be long on that machine?
Well, a lot of classes, I practice yoga a lot, and those you can't.
Yeah,
you can't.
bring
and
them,
a lot of, there's all these girls that film their Pilates classes, and a lot of studios say just can't.
Stop. Yeah.
Also, nobody else wants to be seen in your, I don't know.
Right.
Also, I don't really want to watch your workout video. No offense. I mean, unless you're, like, we represent a few fitness influencers.
Yeah.
Right.
So I'm like, of course, that's your thing. But they're also in their home gyms.
Yeah.
They're
It's
not
a little
like
bit
out
different.
and about. But yeah,
Well, speaking of, how you represent clients,
Yeah.
I don't mean to interrupt your social media
I'm
rant.
completely done with the gym. Actually, that was my excuse of why I don't go to the gym.
Right. There's too many cameras.
Yeah.
But how did you get your first client? I mean, you guys came up with this brilliant idea. Then where do you start?
Yeah, so we had this idea. We both left our jobs. She left in January. I left in February. And then we kind of got started with this space that we were creating, doing renovations for Note House, which is the content creation studio that we have. And then, so really we were just focused on that at the beginning.
Yeah.
We weren't trying to get clients at the time. And then COVID happened.
Dun, dun, dun.
Yeah. And so everything halted. And honestly, I was talking to somebody last night and they said, did COVID help you or hurt you? And you don't really know because it's the only way that we know. But we literally hadn't started.
Yeah.
So, we were sitting at my business partner's and her husband's kitchen table, like working.
Yeah.
And he is a super successful entrepreneur and helped us a ton at the beginning. He's in healthcare and is amazing.
That's
and
awesome.
helped us a ton. Yeah. So we feel very grateful for that. But we were literally just so it hurt us, I guess, but we don't really know.
Yeah.
Right.
And then when things halted there, we said, well, I guess we need to do something. And so creators, a few that we were friends with, they asked us to manage them. Like, would you guys be into it? And we said yes. I think we took on 2 people.
Okay.
And that was kind of a flop in the beginning.
Yeah.
Because we didn't know. I think we kind of thought that or at least I thought that it was the same as PR. And it's just different contexts, different things. Also, it was just a different, we always laugh because it was in the midst of COVID. So people were cutting budgets. Then really people were pushing budgets because people were buying stuff from their home. And that was the only, thing that people really were doing. But first, so I remember we had this, we didn't know how to send emails without being rude or people thinking that we weren't being sensitive to the fact that
it's COVID.
I would have already failed.
So we had this subject line that was cautiously moving forward. And then it said, I had
That's genius.
we're launching our company.
I like that.
We know that this is a tumultuous time, but we
Surprise!
launched a company.
Yeah, that's awesome.
And so that it was kind of a fail. We were working with one creator who we really tried, but it was just such a weird time. We didn't really know what we were doing. And she was like, hey guys, I gotta go figure something else out. You're not making me any money, which was completely fair. She stayed with another manager and has since come back and has now been with us for like 2 years. So all good things. And then we had a creator who we were really close to say, you know, I'm interested in management. And so we were like, we have to get somebody who knows who has the contacts. It's not really, we knew what we were doing. We just didn't have the contacts.
Yeah,
and we didn't realize how much that would be. So we recruited somebody from a really big talent agency in New York, and she became our first manager.
That's awesome.
And helped us like run that part of it.
Mm-hmm.
But we were still very focused on the physical space. And then we were running this kind of simultaneously. That space opened. We were working with brands. We launched with, 10 national brands in the house, and we did events. And so,
So talk about that failure, because I think that's a really important part to hone in on, because a lot of entrepreneurs, if they have a failure early on, it's sometimes hard to pick themselves back up, because like that's their first go. And if it doesn't work, they're like, maybe I'm not cut out for this. Right. And so how did you guys handle that failure? Did you laugh it off? Were you like, or was it, a big devastating moment?
Was it like when you bought a house and you're like, oh, shit?
Yeah, and I was like, why do I have... No.
Congratulations, and I'm sorry.
I think I really blacked a lot. And it feels a little like playing Office.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Like you're just, I laugh now and I tell my business partner, just like sitting at your computer, we were in quarantine.
Mm-hmm.
And I was forcing myself to sit at my computer for like 8 hours a day and do quote unquote work.
Yeah.
And I don't have any idea what I was doing, what we were doing.
Mm-hmm.
She would come to my house and we would take socially distanced walks together.
That's
like
such a wild
6 feet apart. And we'd talk about the business, walk around the neighborhood, and that would be our like meeting for the day. It was crazy. So I think it was an ego hit of this person really trusted us and we kind of let them down. And so, I mean, luckily I blame a lot on COVID. Yeah. I'm like, who knows if it would have worked out if it hadn't worked out. But I mean, my Katie, my business partner, who's also one of my best friends, we're very close. And she is very confident and I'm very not confident, or more, I'm a little bit pessimistic. And so we're a great balance. Like she thinks that everything is going to be great. We're crushing it at all times. And I am like, we're falling apart at any moment.
So I can I ask a question about that?
Yeah.
So we're best friends.
Yeah.
And we do business together.
Yeah.
And we always say yin and yang, right?
Yeah, very much.
Where it's like, she's like, it's going to be okay.
Oh, we'll figure it out.
Tomorrow, when you wake up, it's a new day. And then I'm just like, here's the list of 50 things that.
Yeah, it's like dim and gloom. And I'm like,
our accounting team asks if they want Katie numbers or India numbers, because that's the difference of, she's like, let's just triple that. Let's see what happens. And I'm like, we're gonna fall apart at any moment. Yeah, I mean, thank God. And we both have said that I would not be able to do it without her. I think she could do it without me, probably, but I would never, and I would never want to.
So going down that route, finding a co-founder is difficult. Yeah. And then, I mean, naturally you guys are going to disagree. It's, business partners, we disagree all the time.
Yeah, that's why they walked 6 feet away because of COVID. I walked 6 feet away because you can't reach me.
Right, exactly.
How do you guys navigate that when you guys have a decision that you disagree on? What is your tact to make sure that doesn't hurt your relationship, but it also, you have a calm discussion about it?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's taken a lot of practice. In fact, it feels so weird to not, if I'm alone, people ask where she is and vice versa. It feels very weird that she's not with me, but
we miss you.
I know. We struggled with it. We went through a few months where it was really hard and we definitely had some disagreements. I don't know. I think a lot of it's ego. In fact, almost all of it is ego.
Right.
And so I think, one thing and I can only speak for myself, one thing I struggled with is the idea of needing to be right, or you have this idea and you just want to be able to say that you were right.
Yeah.
And I also I feel like we've gotten better at saying, I don't really care.
Yeah.
You can,
Right.
this is my knee-jerk reaction to what you're sharing with me, but I actually don't care about this one. So
you take
can
it.
call it.
That's
Yeah, and I think dividing and conquering a little bit more. I would run everything by her. I still do. And she would run everything by me. And then at a certain point, we were like, you can make decisions on your own.
Yeah, absolutely.
You know, like I don't need to know if your gut is that, you know, so I think we just got, and I also continue to recognize that we are better together than I would be.
Yeah.
You know, like there's so many things. And we've also recognized the things, or I've recognized the things that she's so much better at than I am.
I think
that
that's
I
important.
just cannot do. And I think she thinks that there are things that, you know, I can do that she isn't as good at. So we've come to that and but yeah, it's hard. It's hard with anybody. I mean, I spend way more time with her than my husband, for sure. I mean, we also we hang out on the weekend.
Yeah,
I mean, we
absolutely.
hang out.
Yeah, you're true friends.
Yeah, we
Not
are.
just business.
She puts my number on Do Not Disturb on the weekends.
No, we are like, I am, I saw her on Saturday and she was like, will I see you tomorrow? And I was like, probably.
Probably so.
See you
But
there.
you know,
Yeah.
that's beautiful though. Like
Yeah,
it's
really
really
special.
you hear so many horrible stories
Yeah.
of like co-founders and whatnot.
Yeah.
But that's beautiful when you find someone that works with you and understands you as a person, understands your strengths, your weaknesses. I don't want to say stays in their swim lane, but they know what they're good at. They know what you're good at.
Yeah.
Like with us, like I don't want to even see financials. Like I don't. She's like, she handles all of those things, and she doesn't like operations, and she doesn't like the day to day, and that's actually what I'm really good at. So we know like exactly like, hey, take a look at this, handle this. Sounds like you have the same type of dynamic that you have with your business partner.
Yeah, it's an interesting. I would not even. I think to me, the idea of an entrepreneur, like that's really cringy to me. Like even when you said that at the beginning, I'm like, I wouldn't say that about myself.
You. Interesting.
And it's funny because now we just hired a business coach, who we love. And it's the only man in our life, our business life. We're both married, but
For a moment, I was like, I thought she just said she had a husband.
No, it's the only man in our business life. We have an all-female team.
I love it.
Me and Katie, our accounting team is all female. He is the only man. And we love him. And he, as like you guys have imposter syndrome, you know, you're going to get over that quick. But so I don't even, it's funny, like even when people ask me, like, can you believe it's gotten to this? I'm like, I don't even know all of a sudden I woke up and there were 13 people on our team and
it happens so fast sometimes.
Yeah, it's so, and I think I underplay the amount of work that we've put into it because I just feel like I'm getting up and going to work with my best friend and I'm typing away.
Yeah, so,
I'm just like
I was
going to
say like it's almost like when you love what you're doing
and
you love the people you're doing it with, it doesn't feel like work.
See, I disagree with that.
Really?
Yeah, it always feels like I don't believe in the statement, if you love what you do, you don't work a day in your life.
Right.
I think it's all work. People who are, musicians and it's still work. Like it's still, if you told me tomorrow you don't have to work anymore, well, that's so hard. I probably wouldn't. I don't know.
You wake up and you're more excited to do what you're doing versus having to wake up and go sit in a corporate office.
Yeah. Of all the things. But I wouldn't say it's like, oh my gosh, this is my passion. Right. It's more, I love that I work for myself. I love that I work with a best friend. I love that I'm able to make, although I still am like terrified to be away from work. Like right now, I'm like, I have taken a lunch break. Yeah. Like I feel scared to be away. And Katie's always like, you know that you
own the company.
Like, I know. You can pretty much do it. But I'm like, if I'm late, she had to tell me to stop texting her if I was going to be 5 minutes late.
I love it.
She was like, I don't care that you're running late. Just show up when you're going to show up. I just don't really. It is because you get into this mind, So yes, I do love it and I do, but it is still work,
it's still work.
And it is, thank goodness I get to do this. Yeah. But it's not like it's still, and now that we have team members and so many people that I can't think too much about the people relying on, because I'm like, oh my gosh, like I just can't.
It's scary sometimes.
Yeah, it's scary. It's scary.
So what was the point of getting a business coach? Like what made you get a business coach? Where did that come from?
We've basically doubled in growth year over year.
Congratulations.
Thank
That's
you.
huge.
And so we just felt like we got to a point where we needed some help, just an outside perspective. You can get, and I don't know if you guys feel this way with being business partners, but you can get in this like circular where you just talk about the same things and you make a decision and then you sort of revisit the decision and we had some problems hiring. Like we were never as I said, I'm super cautious and Katie's like, let's go for it.
Right.
And so sometimes my way would work, sometimes her way would work, and I feel like we were just getting in a little bit, and nothing was bad. We're like, we need a little bit of guidance of somebody outside saying, my gut, like, that sounds right to me. And so now it's like kind of, not a tiebreaker because we haven't really had any issue. It's just more somebody reassuring that the decisions that we're making, because we're just in our own chamber and making these decisions and being like, this sounds good,
Yeah, totally.
And so, we just decided we needed somebody who kind of help us interview people, help us with our management style.
I love it.
The managing's been the hardest part. And you never really get into it and think, oh, I'm going to have to manage a team. You're just doing the job.
Right.
But the best I don't know if it was a piece of advice, but I just remember talking to my mom and just being like, oh my gosh, the managing of people. Like, I think I'm so bad at it. Like, I think I might be an awful boss. And she said, well, India, why do you think that literally the most books on business ever is how to manage people? That's like the most written about, because all of these people go into business because they're good at a thing, but they're not good at managing.
Yeah, they don't go into manage.
Like they go into,
build a business.
Build a business, but then you all of a sudden, so I was like, yeah, that's true, but that's been, we decided, and it's been a good it's an investment to get somebody to help you, but
it's smart. It's very smart.
We just,
And you said that he brought up imposter syndrome. We talked to a lot of entrepreneurs. I know it's cringy. You are an entrepreneur.
I know.
But we talked to a lot, and I don't know what you see, but I see more females that struggle with imposter syndrome than the male side. Is that something similar that you're seeing?
Yeah, for sure.
And so can you talk about your experience with imposter syndrome and how you combat that daily?
I think the definition of an entrepreneur, or what people think of an entrepreneur, is hard. I think of myself as a person who started a small business. Now, I don't know that I now have to talk myself out of saying small, because it's not really a small business anymore. But I think of an entrepreneur, and I think that this is because of the way that people talk about it, as, somebody who starts a business and it's like grow, 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 gets investors, brings stuff in, they're like pounding the pavement, and then the goal is to sell. That's what I think of an entrepreneur. Okay. I know that that's not the case, but I just think most of the stories that are told about
are about that experience.
I love the podcast, How I Built This. Do you guys listen to that?
No, but I want to check it out.
Gosh.
Okay.
It's all about entrepreneurs.
I love it.
It's great. And that's just what you think about.
Yeah.
And so I think it's hard for me to
switch your brain to think.
Switch my brain into that. Or I'm like, I don't have a product. It's just so weird.
Yeah.
And I don't, I'm like, ugh, okay, please.
How do you combat that? So you go through that experience. I mean, do you meditate every day and remind yourself that you're a badass?
No, I don't think I think I downplay it. I don't think I am working on it. I think I'm just.
The honesty.
I think I'm just.
It's just
going
there.
to work every day. I think I'm like still scared to be gone. I don't not think that I. Yeah.
At least you're honest about it. I mean, and you're aware of it, and that's the first step, because you are a badass.
Thank you.
So
Thank you.
You have the business coaches, helping you through a lot of things. What's next? Other than running over past your lunch break.
Right. Exactly. To get back to work. We have stayed more slow and steady than I think. There are a lot of management companies now, and they're growing really fast. The influencer industry is just wild. And since we started, agencies are popping up, and all of a sudden they have 100 clients.
Wow.
We stayed committed to staying more of a boutique agency that could offer really high level service to our clients.
Yeah.
So Our managers have, 8 to 10 clients that they manage, and that's max. And they have a team that helps them with that. A lot of agencies, and there's nothing bad about this. Yeah. Every company has to do it their own way. Sure. But a lot of companies, their managers are managing 15 to 20 people at a time. And we just don't see that that's really doable at the high level of service that we want to offer.
Right.
We like to be involved with strategy. We really want to help creators build a business beyond just doing brand deals, come out, with their own books, their own lines, how can you scale it in a way that's not just short-lived as a career. And so it's worked really well for us. There's definitely been times where we wonder why we didn't sign, the 10 people that asked us to, who have now blown up, and we didn't see it at the time.
Were
And
they
that
dancing?
happens. It's a real part of
Were
it.
they dancers?
No, they weren't dancers. So a couple of them probably started as dancers. But you just never know. Yeah. And somebody, with the nature of videos going viral, it's hard to
predict
and hard to predict. It's also hard to predict what a person will sell and how their audience engages with them, analytics. Also, you have to remember that we are working through platforms that we have no control over. So we're like putting content out on these platforms that we don't have any insight into how
the algorithm changes and then all that. Yeah.
And they're, So so I think we are dedicated to continuing on the kind of slow and steady path. We are now turning down 90% of people who are reaching out to us for management, which is a great, place and problem to be.
Absolutely.
We are in another hiring. I think people are sick of us saying that we're hiring, but we kind of are always hiring.
Yeah. I mean, I like that slow approach, and being able to define what you're doing for people, right? You're not just saying, hey, I'm going to do a quick turn. Here's your brand. Yeah. You like really caring, really taking that person on and providing that level of service.
Yeah.
That's great.
Yeah. You have that vision and you have to stay true to that.
I would like, I think that it's easy for, especially creators. You have to kind of also think of creators, like an athlete or anything else that has this sort of like moment, and you don't know how long the moment's going to last, hopefully a long time. I think it's very easy for somebody to come and say, well, I can help you make this much a year, and we never promise, there's only so much that we can control over that. Right. We can reach out to the brands, we can have wonderful relationships with them. And then if they just don't perform well, there's nothing that we can really do about it. What I can promise is, all of our clients have increased their revenue when they start to work with us. But really, they get, a support system, back-end help. We're managing we manage all of the back end. We're doing all of the negotiating, all of the contracts, all of the invoicing. So it's like having this whole team behind you. And so our goal is to have long relationships with our talent, not just bring you on and, I think we almost under-promise and over-deliver too much, where we are now in like, okay, we got to pitch ourselves on the front end because we end up doing a great job. But like, I think we're like, well, we can't really,
you're right. We don't know what's going to happen.
We don't know what's going to happen. No. But yeah, we are, I don't know. It's so funny because at the beginning, and I think that this is where Katie and I would often not even disagree, but have discussions about, I was very I don't want to do this and I don't want to do this. And in 5 years, I don't want to do this. And I am we've pivoted so much.
Yeah, you have to.
And we've had to. I have no idea what the industry will even look like in a year. Yep. So I'm trying not to predict anymore.
You gotta go with the flow.
People are like, so what's next? What's your goal? I'm like, I don't know. I do. I have vision.
Right.
But I hope that our employees are happy and that they feel like they have a good work-life balance.
Yeah. Right.
I hope I have a good work-life balance. I hope my partner has a good work-life balance. I hope we can continue to grow and not be in, really what we're trying to work on right now is not being in the weeds on things and really stepping out and having a bird. And that's what the business coach and this idea of us as entrepreneurs is how can we do the things that only we can do versus the things that our team can do.
100%. And I think you make a really good point, and I appreciate the honesty and the transparency and being candid about it, because you do have to pivot in business. And on top of that is you don't always know. And I think there's this common misconception that if you're a CEO or an entrepreneur, like you know where you're going and you know what's going to be the end result, and you really don't. And I think we need to embrace that more, that sometimes every day is a new day and you have to make 1,000 decisions.
Totally.
And those decisions are going to change the trajectory of where your business is going. And
well, it's also, we're in a client service business.
Yeah.
So it's like my goals are for my clients.
Yeah.
Like I could tell you all of the things that I want our top clients to do in a year. Like I could tell you where I want them to be.
Absolutely.
I think it's harder when it's us because I'm like, it's all determined on that. So the strategy and the long-term thinking is sort of for them. But yeah, I mean, it's definitely, it's really interesting when we started our company, we had a banker who, helped us open our account. Whatever. Yeah. We literally never heard from them and whatever, fine. And then all of a sudden, we started hearing from them. And I'm like, oh, you now are going to take us serious. Like, you clearly thought that we were just two gals starting a little company, seeing what happens, and so it is funny. I don't know if you've experienced this. Like, it is funny just from a female, point of view that people come out of the woodwork and are like, whoa.
They underestimate.
What did you think I was up to over here?
I give you the benefit of the doubt that you were going to take off.
Yeah. And it is, I mean, that's my favorite part is being kind of secretly crushing. And people are like, oh, wait a second. Yeah.
Secretly crushing. That's pretty badass.
Yeah.
I know we're almost out of time. I just have one last question. Yeah. So we've asked other entrepreneurs this, but what does success mean to you? Because everybody's definition of success is different. We talked about having Lamborghinis as, someone's, but what does it mean?
Just was like, it's a Lamborghini?
No. Give me the Lamborghini.
Blow right by me in a bike lane.
Right, exactly. Yeah, I think about this a lot. I think it's a bummer that we can't just say that success would be not having to worry about money and having a good work-life balance and living a nice life.
I think that's a great definition of it.
I think but I think that people want to hear, well, I want to sell for this, or I want, and I'm like, I'm just trying to make a nice little,
I want to have a peaceful life.
Yeah. I would like to not be stressed all the time, which, I have been for the past 4 years. And it would be nice to, I think that's my definition of success. My husband is very philosophical and very grounded, and he is not really into material things and whatever. And he always says, I just want to be in a point of my life where, or my goal has always been to be at a point in my life where if my car breaks down, I can take it to whatever the nearest shop is and I don't have to get a second quote.
I love it.
And I'm like, that's kind of that's peaceful, being able to take it in and just be like, okay, and not stressing and
just peace, peace.
People always, I've had people ask me for I was like, I don't care about money.
Yeah.
It's just not my thing. I just like financial freedom.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
And just if I'm going to go get a coffee, I don't have to think twice about it. And I do drink a lot of coffee, so.
Way too much coffee.
But just things like that. So I think your husband's point is right? You go into the mechanic to get your car
that's
fixed.
financial freedom.
Yeah,
of just being
like,
okay, it's
it.
not,
I don't need a Lamborghini. I don't need those things.
But I actually really respect, I am so impressed by entrepreneurs that you can tell it's really not about the money. It's really about, who knows what it's about, but it's about the drive and the other, and they know, and the confidence of well, I could build something else, and that's kind of what I'm trying to get to also of you can always pivot and do.
I love it. Well, I cannot thank you enough for coming here and sharing your story.
Taking my extended lunch break.
I know. I feel really blessed that she's,
Yeah, you're very, very, very smart and very talented.
Thank you. That's very kind.
And I'm very, very happy that I got to meet you.
Thank you.
I'm very happy for all the success that you're having.
Thanks.
And it's no doubt you're going to have continued success.
Thank you.
Absolutely. Your energy is contagious.
Thank
and so it's
you.
just, success flows to that, continues
Thank
to.
you.
So best of luck for
Thanks.
Upnote and to your other partner.
Thanks.
We love you so much. and
love
thank
you.
you. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you again, guys, for tuning into this week's episode of the Layover Podcast. We truly hope you enjoyed it. Don't forget to rate and review and subscribe on Apple Podcasts and Spotify, as well as go ahead and check out mindandsocial.com, where you can sign up for our newsletter to get behind-the-scenes content, be the first to know when an episode drops, and, find out about those fun events we're going to be throwing throughout the year. Also, check out the show notes for the information of our guests, where you can find them, their Instagrams, their social media, all of the things so that you can go and share and spread some love. All right, guys, thank you again for joining, and stay tuned for next week's episode.
I can't accept the loss, I'm hard-headed. There's a little bit of madness to my method. Many falling off that fine line that I'm treading. I risk anything to be great, and I'm not letting nobody rob me of my victory. Number one, that's what I'm meant to be. When by any means, only thing that makes sense to me, I can make nice or make history. I got that dog in me, yeah. Turn me up.